Actually, it's past noon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, John.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? And I will give you just a very brief update uh, from the Office of Research and Innovation. I guess we'll start with talking a little bit about indirect costs. We're still in a holding pattern as far as indirect costs. Our negotiated rate of 57% remains in force. Most of that is still in the courts, is one pathway that indirect costs are going through. The other pathway is initially there was a joint association group that was negotiating with Congress regarding a new model, the so-called FAIR model and financial accountability and research model. That's what the FAIR acronym stands for. Um, that was initially met with some enthusiasm from Congress. It would change a lot of how we do things here at the university, but it would still, we would end up with approximately 35% indirect cost rate, down from 57%. A big hit, but something that we think we could manage and that we've modeled. Excuse me. But coming up on the outside, as they say in Kentucky, is the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and they are developing their own model. I don't have any real insight into that particular model. But so those are the two competing models. We are modeling, stress testing what our own grant and award numbers would look like under these new models. And when we have some clarity as to which one is going to win out, I'll share it with the group. At the moment, it's just one of those things that sort of keeps you awake a little bit at night if you think about indirect costs and what they do for our university. But there is nothing that we can do about them at the moment except be engaged with our national organizations and express our opinion. Federal budget. The federal budget is moving through Congress in fits and starts. Right now, it's fits. And so there are budgets being crafted by the House and the Senate, and it remains to be determined whether there will actually be a budget or whether we will have a continuing resolution. If there's a continuing resolution, it still also remains to be determined if it's what they call a clean continuing resolution, which means just a repeat of last year's funding, or a bumpy or lumpy continuing resolution, as they call it in Congress, where some individual projects can be included. Grant terminations. We actually have not had any grant terminations that I'm aware of in the last month. As I've said, each time we've met, I rely on the investigators, the research deans, the chairs, and the school deans to let us know because we may be notified after you. Usually it's the investigator who hears first. But we have not heard anything in the last month as far as terminations of grants. There seems to have been sort of a pause button hit. Um, that doesn't mean things are working really well. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday um, that that the job cuts in the NIH and in the NSF have slowed things down so much that it's almost like there have been terminations, so that there are investigators who are anxiously waiting for their funding, and they've got to employ people. So the inefficiency of the funding agencies is um, a matter of concern We engage with them. The investigators engage with their program officers, and by and large, what we hear is that they're doing the very best they can with the number of people who are still working there. We've had some grant wins in the last month. I'm not going to go through all of them. The news was pushed out through UofL today, but we've received also some very, very fundable scores on COBRA grants that would be our newest COBRA, which is sort of an NIGMS capacity building grant that we depend on to a great extent. And then I guess the last thing on everyone's mind is there going to be a government shutdown? And if so, what does that do to research funding? And we have been thinking about this, and it looks like that there is going to be a shutdown. We don't know how long it will be, but we've been thinking about it and planning for it here in the research office. And I'm going to throw it over to Kevin Merton to explain a little bit about what we've been doing.
Yeah, thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as John said, it does appear increasingly likely that there will be a government shutdown next Wednesday, October 1st, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year. The last government shutdown happened in 2018 and 2019. I think it lasted around 35 days, and that was the longest shutdown in U.S. history. So, we do have some experience with government shutdowns, although the last one was many years ago, and this is certainly a different age and time than 2018. So during a government shutdown, we would expect that many federal employees are going to be furloughed, perhaps even terminated if the administration actually acts on its most recent threats. And so there will be an immediate impact on federally sponsored grant activities. So, for example, we should expect that proposals that have been submitted will sit and not be acted upon. We wouldn't expect to be receiving any new awards or award increments. And then payments and reimbursements, which are important for our cash flow needs, are unlikely to be made until the government reopens. So this can have a significant disruption on the research enterprise as well as on the university, especially if it lasts a significant amount of time. So most pressing, I would say anybody who has federally funded grants that have any upcoming action points, especially actions that would need to occur in October or maybe even early November, that require prior approval from the agency. So things like no cost extension requests, budget modifications, scope changes. Please get those into sponsored programs for submission as soon as you can. While they may not be acted on by next Wednesday, I think you'll at least establish your place in line for when the government does reopen. So please get those things if you know that they're going to be taking place in October over as soon as possible. We did place a notice in UofL today this morning that you'll likely see. We have established an FAQ webpage about government shutdowns and their impacts on grants and contracts. So I'll stick that link in the chat. And then reach out to your sponsored programs representative. They'll be positioned to help facilitate any answers that you have or any answers you have to questions that you have. So that's all I have, John. Back to you. You're muted.
You're muted, John.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Kevin. Appreciate you being on top of that. The link has appeared in the chat to the FAQ page. I saw Roberta, you had your hand up. Did we answer your question while we?
I am so sorry, Dr. Klein. I was like popping around trying to get to the people and I hit the raise my hand. I apologize. That was my mistake.
Well, that's not as bad as having your mic muted after 5 years of this nonsense.
Well,
Okay,
I thank
appreciate
you for
you.
that.
Appreciate you very much. I think we're going to move on and in the agenda, and I think Dean Tabitha Greer-Reed is going to give us a summary of scholarly work in the College of Education and Human Development. Tabitha?
Thank you, John. I am so delighted to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity to tell you about my CEHD, College of Education and Human Development. And I have my fabulous Associate Dean for Research, Innovation, and Community Engaged Scholarship on keys, John Lee. So John, we're gonna just move through. If you want to go to the next slide. I am in my second year here, and I have been really fortunate to come to leadership in a College of Education and Human Development, much like the one I left in Minnesota. So we are diverse. We have 5 departments. We have health and sports sciences, educational leadership evaluation and organizational development, counseling, special education, early childhood and prevention sciences, and elementary, middle, and secondary teacher education. And so for us, the HD is just as important as the E in our CEHD, as we're pretty evenly divided across education and human development. We also have a number of research centers. So we are a pretty medium to large size college with over 100 faculty. We have 4 research centers: Cybers, which is our Center for Instructional and Behavioral Research; Kremstead, our Center for Research in Mathematics and Science Teacher Development, where we are doing a lot of work in the numeracy count space right now; our ECRC, which is headed by John Lee, our Early Childhood Research Center. And then, of course, you're going to learn more today about our Kentucky Reading Research Center, which we are just finishing our first year of having that here on our campus, and it's been an incredibly successful year. Research funding, this is a little known fact that makes me happy every time John Lee tells me this, but that our college is 3rd in terms of grants and expenditures. The last fiscal year, we brought in almost $12 million. So we're just behind the Speed School. And in just July and August of this fiscal year, we were at $2.5 million. And if I remember correctly, I think now that we're in October, we're at over $5 million. So we have a pretty productive research engine. Dr. Klein started by talking about the funding landscape, and you can see that it has impacted us in the College of Education and Human Development. Fiscal year 24, federal aid was really about 1/4 of our pie. That has shrunk to about 1% of the pie, and we are relying much more on state funding for our sponsored projects. Our cornerstones really match the diversity of our departments, which we do see as a strength of our college. And so we are conducting research across the human and organizational leadership realms, teaching and learning, which I think most people might sort of identify with us just because we're a college of education, but we have the and human development, right? So we're also in early childhood, so that pre-K space, as well as thinking about mental and physical health. To support our research engine, we have an amazing office where I've learned, Cecilia used to be a part of it. We've grown a little bit. John Lee is now the Associate Dean for Research, Innovation, and Community Engaged Scholarship. I think you will meet him in just a moment. And then we have Caleb Clemens, who is a just amazing director and leader in that office, who is the program manager. We have Sean Alamo, who is our grant specialist; Danica Lopez, who's a new addition as a community engagement and partnership specialist; and another new addition, Ryan Powell, who is the unit business manager. And we just restructured to include this. I got a little inspired actually by listening to you, John Klein, about thinking about maybe having some specialized skills around grant management to help support that infrastructure. And so we're piloting that now. And that is it for my part about the College of Education and Human Development. I will turn it over now to, I'm not sure if it's John or Todd.
I'm going to
Todd?
take it from here.
Aaron
Okay.
Hogan. Welcome.
Aaron, hello, Aaron.
Hi, Dean Greer-Reed. Thank you all so much for having us here today. We're really excited to share a little bit about our newly established Kentucky Reading Research Center.
And Erin,
As-
just before you go on, I do want to
Yeah.
brag that Erin is is it a faculty fellow with the Reading Research Hall of Fame?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
The first one at the U of L. So good hands.
Thank you so much. Yes, we at the center love reading and understanding what is good and effective instructional practices for our kids in our state and beyond, and what it takes to support teachers in using those instructional practices with kids in their classrooms. So our center was established just over a year ago in response to legislation from the state. It is a legislated center. And we work very closely with the Kentucky Department of Education to enhance and expand their mission to really get best instructional practices into the hands of our teachers. So here's our team, part of our team at the founding ceremony. So, next slide, John. Thank you. We, like I said, work directly in partnership with the Kentucky Department of Education to improve reading outcomes for kids across the developmental spectrum, from pre-K up through adult learners. We are mandated to provide research and data on effective instructional practices. We've spent the last year, as Todd's going to share, really understanding what the evidence says about reading instruction. And then we work with the Department of Education to get those instructional practices into the hands of teachers, school leaders, policymakers throughout the state. I think I covered everything here. Next slide, John. Thank you. And we are guided in our work by really just the best advisory board with professors who are leaders in the field of literacy instruction. From across the developmental continuum. We have Dr. Holly Lane, who you may know from the UofL. If you have kids in schools, you're probably seeing the instruction that Holly has established up through adolescent literacy leaders. And I will turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Erin. I'm going to talk a little bit about really the focus of the center. What we're really looking at is what makes literacy teaching effective. So not only the what, like the curriculum, the programs, things like that, but also the how. So, the pedagogies, explicit instruction, student engagement, practice and feedback, etc. So it's really two areas that we're really looking at. One is research. The other is a clearinghouse. And we'll first talk about the research activities we have done last year and that we're going into this year. In partnership with the Kentucky Department of Education, we've been studying how school practices influence student literacy outcomes through, it's an evaluation of the Read to Achieve program. And the Read to Achieve program, schools can get grant funding through the Kentucky Department of Education. And part of this grant funding is Kentucky Department of Education will be able to evaluate those schools and see what their progress is. So we were able to work with those RTA schools. And prior, all they did was survey those RTA schools. We actually did do that. So we did an RTA survey of administrators, teachers, specialists to get that overall information. But we just didn't think that was adequate enough. So what we also did is we went in and we had focus groups and interviews with school literacy teams so we can gather more information. From there, we also went into classrooms because we think that was important for us to find these, especially the how of effective feedback. So when we were looking at these classroom observations, we have through at the you mentioned before CIBERS, the Center for Instructional Behavior Reading Sources. We have a group of coders that for years have gone into classrooms and have coded instructional behaviors. We call them foundational instructional behaviors. We have currently, it's around 15,000 unique classroom observations. We have used those coders uh, to go in and see what those baseline foundational practices they have. But since this is literacy specific, we're also going in and we're observing for literacy specific behaviors as well. So we were able to do that with a portion of those RTA schools. And from that, last year, we were able to cluster these schools into 4 clusters. We have schools that over the last 2 or 3 years of their academic or reading outcomes, they've had continuous improvement, those that are stable and high, those that are actually continuously in decline, and then those that are we're calling stable low. And from those, what we're looking at is trying to figure out what are the best predictors of positive literacy outcomes. So from those high achieving or those improving schools, what are they doing that may be helpful for those that may be in that low or declining category? We have a small amount of data from last year, but some interesting findings that we found from the surveys. The 2 biggest challenges to effective literacy instruction for teachers is, first of all, time, because there's only little time in the school day, especially for reading instruction and trying to fit all what they need to get in. That will continue. We'll talk about it a little bit in this upcoming year of how we're going to help teachers to look at efficiency. The second, interestingly, is not really literacy related, but it's student behavior, which is also going to inform what we do upcoming this year and in future years, is to not only look at literacy in isolation, but to see it in the overall picture and see how we can help teachers manage student behavior so they can effectively teach literacy. Other things we saw from last year is higher achieving schools, those stable high and those continuously improving schools, they have more tier 1 structures in place. And that tier 1, when we look at tier 1 instruction, we're looking at that general education overall classroom instruction, while those lower achieving schools, they have a slightly higher tier 3 structures. Those are those intensive interventions, which makes sense that if I'm in a lower performing school, that I would need those things. In the upcoming year, what we want to do is really ramp this up. Again, we were only working with the RTA schools, the Read to Achieve schools. But our goal this year is to go outside of that, not only work with the RTA schools, but work with other schools in Kentucky and collect data so we can start to make predictions. So our target this year is to look at 100 schools from across the state. And we've already stratified a sample from that high, low, increasing and decreasing cluster. And we're beginning to organize those observations so we can get in there, so we can survey them, then we can talk to their literacy teams, and we can do these classroom observations. We're really excited about this. It's a little overwhelming, but I think it will go back to, I think it'll show us both the what and the how, and how we're teaching literacy. We're also examining, I was talking about with the survey with behavior. We're looking at this in the teacher preparation area as well. So we have partnered with, at the University of Kentucky, they have what they call the UK Sim Lab, which is a mixed reality simulator. So we have started working with them to get literacy specific scenarios where our pre-service and in-service teachers can get practice teaching literacy skills. So if you're not familiar with mixed reality simulation, there are avatars that appear, but they're actually live. There's someone that is actually operating the avatars that can work with the participant in real time. So we have actually been working with our students at the University of Louisville with this mixed reality simulation. We're going to hopefully broaden it to the other universities in the state with teacher preparation programs so they can begin to use that, especially those effective literacy practices. Um, Along with that, we're also doing a study where we're going to be looking at teacher reactions when there is student behavior. Uh, we're going to target teachers from their first to 5 years, and they will come in. They will actually go through the mixed reality simulation. They will teach a literacy lesson, and we have scripted the avatar to have behavior issues. And what we will be doing is we have a watch that they will be wearing, and it will give them different. It will give us different biophysical um, data like electrodermal activity, heart rate, skin temperature, to see how the teacher not only externally but internally reacts to a student misbehavior. And from there, we can work on coaching to see if we can get them a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more prepared when those things happen. Those are a little bit of the things that we're doing on the research area. John, if you want to go, thank you. The second part is a research clearinghouse. So on our website, we have a clearinghouse that our goal is to offer clear research-based summaries to really distill the research on 4 areas: foundational, adolescent, adult, and family literacy. So what we have done last year, we started with foundational and adolescent literacy, and we have with topics within those areas, we have systematic literature reviews that were conducted over the last 10 plus years. We are now starting to get those up on the on our webpage. You will see an example of those on the right: the effects of phonological and phonemic awareness, and then those with multisyllabic word reading interventions. So these white papers are nice, and I think they're very informative. But again, we're looking to make impact with all of our what we call our stakeholders, not only teachers and administrators, but families, policymakers, etc. So what we want to do is take those white papers, and we are starting to create resources that are stakeholder specific. So first of all, with those white papers we're doing, so if I'm a family member and I want to know about the research on phonological and phonemic awareness, I can read that white paper, or I can look at what we're calling evidence snapshots specifically for a family member. Or if I'm a teacher, I may not have time to read a 40 or 50 page white paper on a systematic review on phonological awareness, but I can look at that evidence-based snapshot that is specifically for me to get an idea of what I need, and I can go forward. We are also starting to build this year resources around this. So it'll be video tutorials or strategies or modules on these specific areas. And again, it's going to be stakeholder specific. So we're going to start to build it. So it's not just a clearinghouse that we will have just, research findings, but it's going to be meaningful for those involved with literacy in the state of Kentucky to go to and get meaningful resources. Again, we're tackling foundation and adolescent literacy this last year and this year, but moving forward, we're going to look at not only family literacy, but also adult literacy. John, if you can move. And with outreach and engagement, again, it goes with what I was saying with the clearinghouse. Really, engagement with the people of Kentucky is really our main goal, and to get our work out there. So we have been conducting interviews with CAOs, assistant superintendents, curriculum instruction leads, to get an idea of what they want, so we can build the center to meet the needs of those in the schools. We have conducted focus groups with teachers, and literacy specialists, instructional coaches, et cetera, to get those needs. We're starting to go to conferences and forums to get this information out. For example, I will be presenting tomorrow at the Kentucky Association of Teacher Educators conference to get the word out to those universities and colleges in the state of Kentucky of the resources that we can provide them. We're starting to build audiences for our e-newsletter that is called Bookmark. And then we have a social media engagement that I'll talk about in just a second. And we're also looking to seek opportunity to partner with schools and districts. For example, Carroll County reached out to us just a few weeks ago to see if we could assist them in some things that are literacy related. We jumped on this opportunity. We're going to work with them, I believe, starting in October and November, going in there, doing classroom observations, giving guidance. And again, so we can make a meaningful impact for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And finally, the website and digital outreach. You can see our website at kyreadingresearch.org. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm forgetting what is that thing. I'm sorry, I lost my. Yeah, as you can tell, I am not the social media person. But yes, we're on social media. If you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, e-newsletter Bookmark, again, go to kyreadingresearch.org on that main page. You can click a link to join so you can get that information. Yes, it's LinkedIn. Thank you. Why I could not remember LinkedIn, I don't know, but thank you very much, Jenny.
Well, that certainly went much quicker than we might have imagined. We're very efficient here in the School of Education and Human Development, as you can see. Dr. Greer-Reed, any last words for the group?
I don't. I mean, I welcome any questions. I am really proud of the work that's happening with the Kentucky Reading Research Center. I feel like for all of us, especially in higher ed, as we think about how we continue to tell our story, that the kind of community engaged scholarship that's happening through that center that makes an impact, not just here in Louisville, but throughout the Commonwealth is going to be increasingly important. And I'm just really excited that that Todd and Aaron and Terry have been able to make such progress in our first year.
I'd like to follow up just a little bit. I think Jenny Rechtenwald had a approved year-end report of the Kentucky Reading Research Center's year-end work, and I think it would be an opportune time for you to drop that in the chat if people had any other questions about what occurred this past year. John Lee, that was probably the most efficient presentation time frame you've had.
I don't think it's even close. But it was yes, it was succinct, but it was full of good stuff. I'm curious about the Reading Research Center. It is a state authorized center, as you said. And so, thinking along the lines of continued funding, does it have a guaranteed line item in the biennial budget, or do you have to go through some sort of approval competitive process?
So we have been told that it is, so there's after 2 years, there is I think they say a reevaluation, but it's not a competitive bid. So, and we've been told that so far they're really happy with what we're doing. So I'm pretty confident it will be a 5-year. And then after that 5-year, then I think we may have to compete, but we will have it for the 5 years.
Okay. Well, and our office is happy to work through relationships with the General Assembly, and then also as you begin to, I wouldn't, and I know you think the same way, as I would start thinking now about how you build out your support for the center, um, and assume that state support may not always be there. We've had lots of centers that were funded by the state of Kentucky, and then the funding, was taken away in a line item, very similar. But I mean, it sounds like you're doing great. You're well received, and they like very much what you're doing. I think Kevin Walsh. Kevin, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the great presentation. I was especially impressed with CEHD, how they've been able to, continue their funding and transition to, it was like over 75% this last year was coming from the state. And my question is, do you have any advice for us? Because the state funding, we have, maybe 10 or 20% coming from the state, but especially with a challenging time with federal funding these days, I was wondering if there's some lessons learned, some strategic advice that you might have for the rest of us, or if there's maybe a way that we can take a look at how to try to get more money from the state.
I think I can provide a little bit of guidance there, what little I can for you, Kevin, and I think Dean Greer might have even more, but I can say that it depends very much on relationships. The final resting ground of switching quickly from federal to state level monies are the relationships that we've built. I think much of that goes to the community engaged atmosphere that we have in education, and we might have a leg up on some colleges in that way, that typically they are relationship built. So most of the funding that we're talking about from the state level comes from our Kentucky Reading Research Center and from our numeracy work that's here, our mathematic work here, that's numeracy literacy, especially by Jennifer Bay Williams and her crew. So we have a great deal of work in that area. As well, although waning a bit, are the training grants that were available for various compartments of teachers that we had. And these training grants are typically quite lucrative in terms of what they can do for graduate and PhD level students, although many of those may suffer consequences here with the new paradigm shift we've had at the federal level, and then also at the state, flowing down through the state level. So what I can also say is the advocacy that we have. So we have increasing relations, which the legislature, and we have increasing relationships across a broad spectrum of the Kentucky Department of Education and within local school communities, particularly in the largest, one of the largest right here in Louisville and Jefferson County. So my bit of advice, if it's worth anything, would be the more relationships that you can build, I think the stronger the opportunity that you have. One last thing I'd like to say is that there's a lot of follow through that we do in terms of the work that we do with state level funders. I think you saw bits of it from the clearinghouse that Todd and Aaron presented here just a few moments ago. When the work that is done in the background, which is large-scale literature review, observational research in classrooms to determine levels of need for PD, et cetera, when that turns into different products that can be used across the spectrum of our families, teachers, researchers, and state-level administrators, that kind of closes the loop of the research work that we do, and I think is seen as a real beneficial element to future relationships and to future funding when that loop gets closed in that way. Thanks for the question.
I want to follow on
John.
that comment. No, I'm not muted. Thank you. So John, I want to follow on that comment. I think those sort of relationships, whether they're with foundations or with government, depending on where your funding comes from, are absolutely essential. I think you're 150% right. And our ability to show that we're not just a U of L, Louisville University, that we serve the entire state or large chunk of the state is really important. Bearing that in mind, though, I think if the people on the call who don't yet have relationships in state government what I'd like them to remember is that we're trying to make sure we don't bump into each other down in Frankfurt going into the session. So there are a lot of resources that governmental relations has. We have a full-time lobbyist at the state level who's very, very well versed in how things work there. We have certainly Nick Peak, who knows state government inside and out since he was in it. And then our office also. So what I would ask really plaintively of everyone who wants to talk about funding for their programs is to just drop a line to Nick and to my office as well. If you're planning on going down to Frankfurt to talk, we can actually sort of coach you up. It's a different world down there. And we can certainly give you some advantages heading into that particular arena. So please don't go solo on your own to Frankfurt or to Washington. We've got lots of resources that can make you much more effective and increase your chance of success.
And to double down on the Johns, I just want to add, yes, Nick Peak is on my speed dial. And I think that the coordinated efforts is part of what is making us successful, as you can see, in terms of just the infrastructure we're building out in the college. I do want to make sure that I also acknowledge the former interim dean, Amy Lingo, who's also the founding director of the KYR. I mean, she is really the force that brought that Kentucky Reading Research Center to Louisville through her long-standing relationships in state government and at the Kentucky Department of Education, and actually continues to be, in a founding director role, an important resource and advocate for the center, which is about $6 million over 2 years.
I'm going to throw it over to Lee Botner here in a second to talk about some developments, some news and research development and strategic initiatives, or maybe it's Cecilia. I don't know who's going to take this, but I do want to say that, you know, I probably have been at the University of Louisville longer than anybody on this call. This is my 43rd year. And we have never been more successful with the General Assembly. We have achieved a level of parity with our cousins throughout the state, and particularly in Lexington, that we have never had before. And this is the time to build on that momentum. We're being very successful down in Frankfurt, and believe me, it has not always been the case. Who's going to take it? Lee, Cecilia, who?
I think
Well,
Cecilia has a question.
I just had a comment because we talked about Kevin's question about how did you grow so quickly, and the last thing that I did when I was working at the College of Education was to work on the grant that we just discussed. And so I just want to kind of also add in there that having a very strong research administration group helps the growing and the maintenance of that. Shout out for Sean, who was, you know, part of that when I was going through that as well. Having that communication with your research administrators and their office, the state office, having strong follow-up, strong communication on those contracts is really key to either keep or break those relationships. So just make sure that you recognize the importance of your research administrators in that process as well.
And let me insert a slightly Grinch-like note into this discussion. If the largest chunk of money that you have coming into your research program comes from either the state or federal government, please understand that that is in all likelihood transient, because we have seen this with centers throughout the university. There at one time were a line item in the state budget, and then it disappeared, and those centers have struggled mightily. So the time to diversify your funding is when you first get the state money and can leverage that success with foundations and with federal funding. Don't wait until you're about to be cut off by the state, start right away as soon as you have success at the state to begin to build out your funding base. It's just like our retirement portfolios, people. You gotta diversify. Over to Lee Botner.
Thanks, John. I just have a few different announcements that I wanted to make. And I put them in the chat in case you all wanted the information and the details with the links for later. The most importantly one is I want to highlight that next week is the deadline for our 3 internal grants, a letter of interest. And the 3 programs that we're running this year is the John Rieger Seed Grant, which we have offered in prior years. There are a couple of differences this year. We did open up the John Rieger to be for anyone at the camp, any faculty, permanent faculty that can apply, including postdocs. The previous round, it was just early career faculty. We will continue to give preference to early career faculty, but we did open it. The John Rieger also requires an undergraduate student because this is an effort that is co-hosted through the Office of Undergraduate Research, and some of our funding comes from there. We also, in this program, this is primarily for new scholarship and research, and there's a tremendous expectation that this will be seed funding for you to go and get other external grants. The total is $8,000. That is the limit. The second one is a new program, and we're calling it the Collaborative Research for Emerging Synergistic Teams. And this is an exciting opportunity for researchers from 2 different colleges or schools to work together in a new research endeavor and to start a partnership for the very first time. It requires at least 2 or more investigators. And this one, we're offering significant funding in the amount of $35,000. Again, with an expectation that this will lead to much larger grant funding, external grant funding in the future. The last one is the Humanities, Arts, and Social Science Microgrant Program. This is also new and was primarily brought together through the HASS focus group and leadership in the College of Arts and Science. However, this is open to humanities and social science in particular, and however broadly defined you want to make that be. I know some of you within the College of Education and Human Development may consider the work you're doing to be social science, so you would be welcome to apply as well. These are for existing projects and works that you already have in project, and they're for a total of $3,000. And the other difference on this one, as opposed to the other 2, is we are providing a little bit of, well, it's not a stipend, but a one-time payment can be requested for any researcher that is on a 9 or 10-month contract, but is expected to do research in the summer. If you have a full-time appointment and you're expected to do, not full-time, but your full-time includes 12 months, you can get a little bit of funding. So those were my primary, I think the most important announcement. The second one is our proposal repository. This is an initiative that was originated out of the College of Engineering, Speed School of Engineering. And it consisted under the leadership of Jackie Smith to bring together administrators on campus, including my office, to work to create behind a firewall proposals that faculty had received the award and who would be willing to share their successful proposals. One of the questions that I get the most is people calling me to see if I have a sample or an example of a proposal that's been successful. And some of the administrators that were part of that group So that was a question that they got a lot. So for the first phase, we are accepting proposals from faculty. So if you have a successful proposal and would be willing to share it, you can redact any portions of it that you want. But there is a link there, and you will have to answer some questions about confidentiality and whether, and that your understanding of who in the institution is allowed to view it, and the information that those viewers will be given around confidentiality. The third announcement is there is an upcoming NIH grant writing course and boot camp through our relationship with Meg Bouvier and the grant group. I've listed those there, and there's also an Ask the Grant Writing Expert live Q&A coming up in next week on October 1st. So if you're interested in NIH, this is an absolute wonderful boot camp for anyone looking to apply for the R series. And then lastly, the Office of Human Subjects Protection Program reached out to me yesterday, and they are asking for me to share with you guys that they will be at the Research Louisville on the 15th and the 17th, and they've got some sessions there that they would love for you to stop by and get to visit with them and learn more about how to be compliant with human subjects. If you have any questions for them, you can feel free to contact their office. And I think that's all that I have for today. Kevin, do you have a question?
I didn't have a question. I had a comment just to add to when we get to that for like additional items.
Yeah.
Is it okay? I want to put in a pitch for General Electric does a Makers Fair every year. Larry Partero, who was a former director of the First Build, runs that, and they have it at UofL. It's at the Student Activity Center. They get up to 5,000 different people from around the community here, and so this is an opportunity for UofL, I think, to showcase itself, obviously, and the format of that are these booths that they have that you can sign up to participate in there, and I can try to get the information to forward it all. And so, I'm trying to get our competition teams and all to have a presence there. But in the past, they've had art and anything that at all is hands-on at all that the kids get excited about would be welcome. And Larry has a soft spot, of course, for UofL because he went to UofL and Speed School. So you can probably spin it however you would like, and he would be interested in some participation. Because I think right now they're a little short on booths. So I'll put a plug in that, and I think that's October 18th.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else have any information they would like to share? I do know that Cecilia is always looking for people that are interested in presenting at this forum. And I'm also interested in anyone in the audience who would be willing to be reviewers for the internal grants. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to email me. I will start reaching out to potential reviewers. It should be tomorrow. And then sort of similar to that, if you have been a prior recipient for any of our internal programs and have not submitted your progress report, I will be starting to bug you. So keep in mind that will be coming soon. It's important that we track return on investment for these so that we can use it as leverage for getting other funding, if that's even possible these days. But it's very nice to see that, and we need to share that because we all recognize in the research office that internal grant funding is critical to getting a jump start for a lot of, particularly our early career faculty. John, do you have any other comments?
I think we got 5 minutes left. I'll take 35, 40 seconds to say that I think the grant repository can turn into a tremendous asset for the entire university, as do the grant writing courses. I know particularly younger faculty are very discouraged by the changes at the NIH and the NSF. It's easy to get down. I think you have to keep pitching, keep refining your proposals. I think smart scholars, and that's everybody on this call, can find ways to couch what they want to study that can avoid the minefields that have sprung up in the federal granting agencies. It just requires a little mentorship and a little bit of creative thought. And this period we're living through will not last forever. Nothing, because nothing does. And I guess it was William Cullen Bryant, quoted by Dr. King, said that the truth crushed to earth will rise again, and that no lie can live forever. So write those down on your desk and keep looking at them every day, because better days are coming.
All right, I think we should end on that positive note, unless someone else would like to share another positive thing. All right, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks all.